Midtown studios of Bloomberg Television in New York City, this is Charlie Rose.
As the civil trial of OJ Simpson comes to a close, details of the case continue to emerge. The latest perspective on the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman comes from the two detectives who were so closely involved in the criminal case. In their new book, Dismissed Evidence, retired LAPD detectives Tom Lange and Philip Vannatter chronicle the police case against Simpson and reveal evidence that was not introduced in the criminal trial. I'm pleased to have both of them here this evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
To have you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Nice to have you here.
Thanks.
Are you tired of talking about this?
Boy, are we. Very much so.
I thought this would have gone away a long time ago, but it just seems to keep regenerating itself and going on and on.
What do you think it is? I mean, why are we all so obsessed by this one murder case?
You know, I think, Charlie, this is the greatest soap opera that ever occurred. Everything is involved in this. Wealth, celebrity, well-known people all over the country, and it's generated its own interest. It's generated its own firestorm.
And it continues.
And continues to build, I think.
I mean, Geraldo Rivera has built a television show.
He sure hasn't he?
And knows a lot about this stuff and has built a television show every night, examining now other things too, but that. What do you regret about your own involvement in this case? What, when you look back, do you say, God, if I could do one thing over, this would be it?
I don't really regret anything in this case. I think that as far as the actual scene investigation goes, I would have liked to have been afforded an opportunity to do a final walkthrough. However, we had to interview Simpson, so I couldn't get to that. We had to leave people to their own devices, so to speak. Normally at a crime scene, the investigator will take his technicians, his criminalist, his photographer, his print people, and do a final walkthrough and make sure that they got all of the evidence. As we know, the blood was not collected from the rear gate. This led to the planting conspiracy theory by the defense. It made us look bad. That's probably the only mechanical thing that I do over again. But we handle this investigation very well.
Yeah.
Well, you know, with the ability to use hindsight, obviously there's some things I would have done different to diffuse some of the defense arguments. But knowing that everything I did was well within policy and was well within my job description of trying to protect evidence and trying to solve a murder case. But you know, with hindsight, I don't think anyone, Charlie, to be honest, anybody has been put under the microscope that Tom and I were put under. And a question that I would like to ask some of the pundits that's been questioning our job is, would their job stand up as well as ours did under the same microscope? I'm surprised they didn't find more things that we made mistakes on.
And interesting you make that point, and I agree with you, because Bob Woodward makes the point as an investigative reporter, you know, that if somebody came and looked at an institution like his work, in the same way that he looks at other institutions, he's sure that they'll find things that he is not completely perfect on, and the point is well taken.
Also interesting that if you do find that criminal investigation where there are no miscues, there are no mistakes, there is nothing that's been overlooked, now you're looking at a conspiracy. Now you got a problem, because there's no such thing as perfection in life, as we all know.
On the basis of what you thought, having seen the evidence before the trial began, did this look like an easy one?
An easy case?
Easy conviction.
After we assemble all the evidence?
Yes.
There's
After you had the evidence.
Yeah, there's no such thing as an easy conviction. I will say, however, that in 21 years of homicide investigation, I've never seen so much evidence in one case. I mean, with the evidence that wasn't presented, as we point out in our book, you could have convicted most people of this crime. That's just the stuff that wasn't presented.
Like, for example, the two things you think should have been presented are?
Certainly our interview with Simpson as a suspect. There were 10 or 12 various inconsistencies that to this day were used in the civil trial to impeach Simpson with. The Bronco chase produced a multitude of physical evidence. None of that was brought. I can go on and on.
Why wasn't it introduced?
I feel that the prosecution knew the LAPD was on trial. They knew the jury was glaring at us, and that actually happened when Phil and I were in there. We'd get glared at. They knew that to embrace our evidence, to embrace the things that we put on, they would appear close to the LAPD, and that would probably put off the jury. That's part of it. But the other part is I think they felt safe with the blood evidence, this other multitude of evidence that they had, and that they really didn't need to take the chance to get too close to the LAPD.
In a way, you're saying the prosecution blew it.
I think they proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. But yes, in a certain way they blew it, because you never have too much evidence in a murder case. You put it all on and let the chips fall where they may.
Well, you know, the only way that I would compliment the defense team in this at all, the only compliment I would have for them, is they were able to shift the focus of this entire thing from a brutal double murder, 2 people butchered, 2 families maybe ruined, some of the members for life, and they were able to take that focus away and focus it on the Los Angeles Police Department.
And they were able to do that successfully.
Very.
Because of the LAPD.
No, I disagree, because of the...
First of all, you got Tom, who's already saying that jury came into that jury room with a perception about the LAPD.
A perception, not a reality.
Yeah, but the perception determines reality.
Well, not in all cases. You're dealing with a political climate in Los Angeles where you've had the riots prior because of the Rodney King incident. And, you know, looking at the Rodney King incident, that was a horrible thing. I mean, those officers overreacted, obviously, but we're only talking about a few officers. We're not talking about 8,000 officers in the Los Angeles Police Department. And then the perception that the LAPD is racist. Well, of course there's members of that department that have racist tendencies, but it's a very, very small minority.
Any doubt that Mark Furman is one of them?
Well, I think what Mark Furman did, I think, speaks for itself. I mean, I can't. I wouldn't even want to comment any farther. I think it speaks for itself. That was vile language that doesn't belong in our society. Period.
And why was he there then?
Well, he was there. See, that again, a misconception has come out that he was a working partner of ours and that we knew him, and he was there because he happened to work the division where the crimes occurred. And in reality, Tom and I had never met him until that morning.
Didn't know him?
Never knew him.
Didn't know him by reputation, didn't know him by sight, never met him?
Had never met the man.
Yeah.
And
didn't know him by reputation, though? Absolutely
not. No, that's a very large police department. And didn't know him, and still to this day don't personally know him.
It was never talked to him personally? You've talked to him since then?
Oh, well, I talked to him during the early stages of the trial, during the preliminary hearing, and then when he testified at the criminal trial. And I haven't talked to him since. And that's, what, has that been a year and a half?
Have you wanted to talk to him to say,
no.
Man?
No. He did, the worst thing in this whole thing he did was something that I have never seen, and I'm sure Tom has never seen. He got on the witness stand and took the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination.
Right.
Well, that leaves the Aurora that he's done something wrong. And if he's done something wrong, he put the same umbrella over all of us. And the truth is, nothing was done wrong. I was there. And that really was a horrible thing that he did.
You've talked about this 1,000 times, and so has everyone else. The decision to send, your decision to ask him to go over the wall?
Our joint decision. I was the one that verbalized it, but it was a joint decision between myself and my partner.
What do you say to all those people who say you had to know Simpson was a suspect? You know, when they try to find fault with you, that's where they come.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. That is really a misconception. Simpson was not a suspect. And Johnny Cochran talked at length about a rush to judgment. You know, these officers made a rush to judgment. For us to go to a crime scene and just automatically include someone as a suspect is really a dereliction of duty. We determine a suspect by the physical evidence and how the physical evidence leads us to that suspect. Obviously, Simpson was a potential suspect. Anybody that had personal contact with him was a potential.
But is it semantics then?
No, it's not at all. It's not at all. A potential suspect is any person that would have had personal contact and would have had the ability to do this. I mean, you could go out on the street and say a perfect stranger is a suspect. I mean, but when we went over there and when we went over the fence, OJ Simpson was not a suspect, not until we had physical evidence that we felt connected him to that crime that we call probable cause.
Why did you send him over the fence?
Well, I mean, I would have been derelict in my duty, and Tom would have too. This was a circumstance that we thought something was wrong. We believed strongly something was wrong, and
something was wrong, meaning
someone could have been hurt, someone could have been dying, someone could have been dead. Anything could have been going on, and it was brought on by a set of circumstances.
Charlie, if I may, I would ask any reasonable thinking person to put themselves in our shoes. We just left a brutal, bloody crime scene. We drive less than 5 minutes to a location what we know is the estranged or divorced husband of one of the victims. Okay? It's still dark out. We pull up. The first thing we see is a vehicle askew. It looks like the rear end is sticking out a little bit. We run it. It comes back to Hertz. We associate Hertz with O.J. Simpson. This car did not look like it was parked correctly. It looked like there was a problem. There was a stick on the parkway that was out of place. We went around to the front. You see 2 cars in the driveway. Okay, it's 5:05 a.m. There's a light on inside. The security people come by, and we question them. They say, West Tech Security says that we have no idea about Mr. Simpson being out of town. He's usually in there. And in fact, he has a housekeeper that stays there all the time. We say, okay, can we have the phone number? Fine, we get the phone number. We phone the house. We hear it ringing, and we hear the answer machine coming on. No response. Now, I suppose we could have turned around at that point and gone to breakfast.
Or
would that have been the reasonable thing to do?
I guess what you would, others might argue that you might have turned around and gotten a search warrant.
A search warrant with what? What probable cause do you have for a search warrant?
An exigency, you don't need a search warrant for an exigency. If we're at that point, we just go back and work the crime scene. We went in there genuinely feeling that someone's life was in jeopardy. Someone was dead or dying. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, what if O.J. Simpson is in there bleeding to death with his housekeeper? Yeah. We've just been told...
If it had been a double hit of something.
By the by the security people that he's supposed to be in there, and he's not answering his phone. How irresponsible would have been if we just left?
We'll change course here a little bit in the interest of time. The interrogation of Simpson that was not introduced in evidence. Everybody always wondered what was on it and how he did and why they didn't introduce it in evidence. And perhaps some of the reasons you explained here, perhaps other reasons, and maybe Marcia Clark will explain that when her book comes out. Characterize him. Because I've had people on this program, and I've heard others say, wow, what an opportunity you had. Here's a guy who says, I don't need my lawyer. Sit down. You know, I mean, I have all kinds of people come in and say, this was a unique opportunity
that we took full advantage of.
Hours and hours and hours and hours examining.
Okay. Charlie, that we took full advantage of. Right, to begin with, you mentioned the word interrogation. This was not an interrogation. This was an interview. An interrogation is accusatory. You have direct evidence linking a person to a crime. At that point, you can become contentious. You can play good cop, bad cop. Right. You get in their face. Here's the evidence. You were there. We got your prints. We got your blood. That's an interrogation. An interview is investigative in nature. You attempt to glean inconsistencies. This suspect, potential suspect, can get up and walk out at any time. When we sat down...
So you wanted not to reach that point where he wanted to get up and walk out?
We wanted to glean these inconsistencies, but more importantly, we wanted his blood. And he was volunteering to sit there and talk to us and give us his blood in photographs of the fresh cut finger, still gaped and bleeding, to corroborate this blood. We wanted that. We didn't want to have to wait to get a search warrant. We need blood results now. If we became contentious, he invokes, we not only lose all those inconsistencies that are still being used today in the civil case, but we lose the blood and everything else. He is a narcissist who thought he could control that interview. You let him do that.
You clearly think that was his mindset.
Oh, yeah.
I can control this interview. These guys are no match for me. I've been in tougher circumstances than this.
Oh, you bet. Have you ever heard of a potential suspect or a suspect having a criminal defense attorney with him and waiving his constitutional rights
Well,
and telling his attorney that he'll talk to the police?
Some will argue that there's no better sign of someone's innocence than the fact that they say that. No, they will argue that. That's a legitimate and rational conclusion.
Okay.
If you say, I don't need a lawyer, I haven't done anything,
Sure.
I'm happy to talk.
Charlie, let me clear this up. Early on, we knew that this was a case that was not going to be solved by something that this fellow was going to say, by an admission, certainly not by a confession.
How did
this
you know
rested
that?
on the blood, because we had blood from the suspect at the crime scene. If
Oh,
it
I
is
see.
not his blood, it's a moot point. If it's his blood, now you have an interrogation
So
situation.
you're saying
But
the
didn't
main
have
thing
the
for us
blood.
to get was the blood because
Yes.
we had blood from the crime scene
Yes.
and it had to be the
Yes.
assailant's blood
Yes.
because we already knew it wasn't the defendant's blood.
We didn't know.
I mean,
We
already
knew
knew there
it-
wasn't the victim's blood. We
Yes.
had blood there that was not the defendant's.
Yes.
Yeah, it
why
was not connected to the
why
crime scene.
get contentious with this individual and have him blow up and say, hey, I'm trying to help you here, and you're yelling at me, I'm out of here. He walks out, you don't get your
Well, but
blood.
he might not do that if he thought he could handle the situation.
Not
Well,
if you
yeah,
yell
no,
at
You
him.
just said
No.
this is a guy who's not.
Why
threatened
take
by
that
it.
chance?
Yeah, see, now you're talking about an interrogation. You're talking about where we get in his face and we start accusing and we start trying to yell at him or whatever.
Just now, in hindsight, nothing you would have done different in terms of that interview.
That was done by the
Because
book
getting the blood
procedurally.
was even
Yes.
today, looking back, getting the blood. There's no
Listen,
question you would have.
we couldn't
bear
have done
with
it
me
any
that
better.
we're talking about 20/20 hindsight. Couldn't have done it any
Could
better.
not have done it any better.
And I know
Look
you've
what
thought
we
about
got.
this 1,000 times.
Well, sure.
We got more information in 33 minutes from OJ Simpson than the attorneys have in days and days of sworn testimony, and they're using our interview for the sworn testimony.
To impeach him.
To impeach him.
Yeah.
Sure.
How are they impeaching him? What does he say in your interview?
He's had 2.5 years, and he still can't get an alibi straight.
All right, take a look at this. This is an audio clip in which the two of you are interviewing OJ Simpson about the cut on his finger. Roll audio tape.
How did you get the injury on your hand?
I don't know. Well, not the first time. I know I bet when I was in Chicago. I know how, but at the house I was just running around. And
How did you do it in Chicago?
I broke a glass. I just was. You had one of you guys that just called me, and I was in the bathroom, and I just kind of went bonkers for a little bit.
Is that how you cut it?
It was cut before, but I think I just opened it again. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You know,
Do you recall?
because going there, pardon me?
Do you recall bleeding at all in your truck in the Bronco?
I recall bleeding at my house, and then I went to the Bronco. The last thing I did before I left, when I was rushing, was went and got my phone out of the Bronco.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that is,
Where's the phone now?
in my bag,
Oh, you have it.
in that black bag.
You brought it back with you.
Well,
Yeah, it's in my car.
Yeah.
So, do you recall bleeding at all?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was bleeding, but it was no big deal. I bleed all the time. I mean, I play golf and stuff, so there's always something nicks and stuff here and
So
there.
did you do anything? When did you put the Band-Aid on?
Actually, I asked the girl this morning for it.
In Chicago?
Yeah. Because last night I just put when Cato was, when I was leaving, he was saying something to me and I was rushing to get my phone, I put a little thing on it and it stopped.
Sounds like an interview to me. Anything that's important about what we just heard?
Oh, absolutely. You got 3 different stories on how he cut his hand right there.
Yeah.
Right there's a prime example. You have him first saying he doesn't know how he did it.
And he did it in Chicago.
Then you have him saying, I did it in Chicago.
And then open an old wound.
Exactly. And then, well, maybe I just opened an old wound. And then, gee, I don't know. I play golf. Maybe I cut it playing golf.
All right.
you
And how
know?
about the demeanor, what he's saying, the words tap dance come to mind.
Tap dancing around the question.
Well, sure.
Yeah. When you left that interrogation, you said to your partner, this guy did it. This is the guy.
We didn't have the blood. Phil, at that point, was much more positive about this than I did. I felt very strongly that this
Much
was
more
a
positive
suspect.
about the fact that
About-
OJ was the guy.
Yes, and being culpable. However, we did not have the blood. The blood was, in effect, going to be our smoking gun. We needed the blood. That's why we had to get it then. So I kind of waited for the blood. It looked good. And there was nothing exculpatory. There was nothing pointing to another suspect. Nothing pointing away from him.
Yeah.
The blood was this entire case then. It is this entire case now. It tells the whole story.
Roll tape. This is a conversation with Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, who had something to do with the blood case made by the defendants. Here it is. There's no question in your mind that they tampered with the evidence, that they did the things that...
I think we proved it.
You know, people talk about that all the time, and I think that's sort of like water under the bridge at this point.
Yeah.
But there's a more compelling point that Barry was alluding to, which is that, I mean, the prosecutors, I mean, police officers may have tampered with evidence. The prosecutors tampered with that jury. One of the reasons that the jury, I think, was so quick to return a verdict of not guilty in this case is that they felt betrayed by the prosecutors. You had prosecutors who, it's not a question of should have known about Mark Fuhrman. They did know about Mark Fuhrman. They knew he was a racist. They knew he was a liar. They knew that Vannatter was a liar. They knew that they had
Vannatter a liar about what motivated him to go over.
Of course. It was obvious. It's obvious to everybody. It's obvious to anybody who works in the criminal justice system what motivated them to go over that wall that night. It had absolutely nothing to do with notifications.
Well, not only that, take Judge Ito, who certainly was not making rulings in favor of the defense from the beginning to the end of the trial. He made a finding that Vannatter displayed a reckless disregard for the truth, which in legalese means he lied, in obtaining a search warrant from the judge at the very beginning of the case. And I defy anybody to tell me why this man was walking around with an unsealed reference sample from OJ Simpson, Mr. Simpson's blood, for 3 hours.
What do you say? He says, I defy anyone to tell me why.
Well, he doesn't know. After sitting there through all the testimony and being privy to all the reports and all the sworn testimony, he still doesn't have the story right. I didn't walk around with an unsealed vial of blood for 3 hours. I received a reference sample from the registered nurse. I placed it into a analyzed evidence envelope, and I transported it to the criminalist who was booking the evidence because I couldn't book it at that time. See, they haven't told the general public that there's certain policy and procedure that has to be followed to book a piece of evidence in Los Angeles property. To do that, you need a division of record number, you need a item number on the property report, and you need a completed property report. None of that was available. So my job as one of the detectives is to collect, control, and ensure the proper chain of custody of a piece of evidence. And that's exactly what I did in this case.
It was delivered to the criminalist. The criminalist, in this case, was responsible for booking evidence. Would have been more responsible for Phil to lock it in his desk drawer. And when we're going out to meet the criminalist is the one that's going to book this. It makes all the sense in the world. And let me just say, the very last things in our mind would be that someone would ever accuse us of planting evidence. We have a murder investigation to conduct. We're not worried about people saying we planted evidence and conspiring. It's absolutely ridiculous and it's ludicrous, and that man knows it.
And
that man knows it.
That man, Peter Scheck, or
Peter
Barry
Neufeld
Scheck
and Barry
Peter
Scheck
Nova know it. That's what is so disingenuous
what are they doing
about this.
Characterize
Because they
what
made
they
their
are doing.
choice. They made their choice. They're going to stay on that side of the fence and defend this butcher and these murders. They made their choice, and they're not apt to change.
something else. Something else.
Even if they believed otherwise.
Oh, no.
They're not stupid. They know what's going on here, and they know that we didn't plant any evidence. They know that.
And do you think they know that OJ Simpson did it?
They have to know. They have to know. They've used blood evidence and DNA to get people out of prison before. They know the ramifications of DNA. Of course they know that.
Something else that they don't tell you during this clip is if you look at the sequence of events that occurred that day, every blood sample had already been collected. And packaged before we ever received the reference sample of Simpson's blood.
Charlie, this is a physical impossibility that it had already been collected. What are they saying? I mean, Simpson was on the plane from Chicago to L.A. when that blood was collected.
I owed you to run another tape. Here is Chris Darden for the prosecution. Roll tape. Taking an easy case, do you believe Vannatter lied at all?
I don't believe Vannatter lied at all.
So when he said we didn't think O.J. Simpson was a suspect, he was telling the truth?
I think he was telling the truth when he said that. And let me tell you, I spent a lot of time with Phil Vannatter, and I think I gained his confidence. You know, and I'm a prosecutor, and I have a badge, and he's a detective, and he has a badge, and, you know, we sort of, you know, we sat at the bar a couple of times, and we discussed these kinds of issues.
Kicked him back and had it heart to heart.
And had a heart to heart. And I think that those detectives, in addition to having been ordered to go to Rockingham to notify O.J. Simpson, I think they were a little starstruck. I mean, he was O.J. Simpson, one of the greatest football players in the history of the NFL, and I think they wanted to meet the guy. I honestly think they were just a little starstruck, in addition to having been ordered up there.
You'd probably quarrel with starstruck, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, I don't think I've ever been starstruck in my life. You know.
Yeah. This was a murder investigation.
That's all it was, and I have all the respect in the world for Chris Darden. I am proud to call Chris Darden a friend.
The book is called Evidence Dismissed, the Inside Story of the Police Investigation of O.J. Simpson. One more contribution to try to understand what went on in that trial and the aftermath of that trial, which continues to fascinate America as a jury sits considering a civil suit as we speak. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you,
Philip.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.